Dans les deux langues. We have spent the past 3 weeks crisscrossing the country talking about our plan for families, for workers, for students, and for seniors. And we haven't shied away from highlighting some pretty stark policy differences. Because in this election, the stakes could not be higher. Canadians have a choice to make. This October, will we let Conservatives like Doug Ford and Andrew Scheer take us backwards? Or will we keep going and build on the progress we've made? Because let's face it, we've moved the dial a lot in just 4 short years. When Harper's Conservatives were in power, we had flat wage growth, flat job creation, flat economic growth, and quite frankly, flat ambition. People were falling behind. Families were struggling with the rising cost of living, and Conservative politicians were failing them, offering no plan for the future and no way out. So in 2015, people voted for change. They voted for a team that believed in investing in Canadians and growing the middle class. A team that thought helping people rather than cutting programs and services was the right course for Canadian prosperity.
Despite all the progress we've made, we know there is still much to be done. We know that we can and must do even more to help families. But I have never been more certain than that investing in people is the right thing to do. After all, that's what our record shows. In 4 years, we created more than 1 million jobs, most of them full-time. Parents have more money in their pockets thanks to the Canada Child Benefit. We have taken important steps to protect our environment, and we lifted 900,000 Canadians out of poverty, including 300,000 children. We secured concrete results for Canadians, results that make a real difference in people's lives. We just can't afford to go backwards. And a vote for the Conservatives is a vote to go back to the Harper years, a vote to go back to a time when they were giving tax cuts to the rich, when the environment was ignored, when it was cut after cut after cut. Canadians know that that's what happens when Conservatives take office. Students here in Ontario were able to see that for themselves.
Doug Ford said that not a single person would lose their job to pay for his massive cuts. Well, tell that to the 10,000 Ontario teachers who are losing their jobs. And now, Andrew Scheer is asking you to double down on Conservatives. That's twice the handouts for big polluters and the wealthy, and twice the cuts for you and your family. While Doug Ford focuses on buck a beer, there are grade 12 students that might not graduate this year because there aren't enough teachers to offer the courses they need. He cut Ontario's pharmacare program, and he scrapped Ontario's cap-and-trade program, which funded energy efficiency initiatives for homeowners, renters, and businesses. Think about that. Cuts to education, to healthcare, to environmental protection. We can't afford to double down on the Conservatives, not here in Mississauga, not across Ontario, not anywhere in Canada. So here's the Liberal pitch. We will make your life more affordable, and we will make our streets safer, and we will fight climate change. That is at the core of what we stand for as a party and as a movement. And we're staying focused on you, because the Conservatives certainly aren't. If they're elected, the Conservatives will change the tax system. Under a Conservative government, a person making $400,000 a year would benefit more than a person making $40,000 a year with their tax cuts. And if you use a business to create a tax shelter for millions of dollars, well, Andrew Scheer would let you save as much in taxes as the average Canadian earns in a year. That's not right. Canadians need, and Liberals believe in, tax fairness. So we're going to cut taxes, again, for the middle class and those working hard to join it, saving the average family almost $600 a year with nothing for the 1%. And along the way, we'll lift another 38,000 Canadians out of poverty. So while Andrew Scheer focuses on helping the wealthiest few, we'll stay focused on you.
We will lower cell phone bills by 25% in 2 years, set up a national system of guaranteed leave for families, and we will help you buy your first home. And to ensure everybody's safety, we will give municipalities the power to ban handguns if they so wish. And finally, we will ban military-style assault weapons right across the country because weapons of war do not belong in our communities.
In the fight against climate change, we've done more to protect our environment than any government in Canada's history, from introducing a world-leading oceans protection plan and putting a price on pollution, to phasing out coal and banning single-use plastics. But still, we have more to do. Young people like you are all driving the global movement for climate action. You're calling on your leaders to step up and actually lead. You're frustrated, and so am I. We have more to do, and we will. A re-elected Liberal government will go even further to protect our environment and fight climate change. Under our leadership, Canada will hit net zero emissions by the year 2050. It's an ambitious target, but I know we can get there, and in the process, we'll become world leaders in clean technology. We have the talent, we have the vision, and most importantly, we have the backing from Canadians who want a government that will wake up every day and drive climate action. Doug Ford, Jason Kenney, Andrew Scheer,
they all belong to a generation of conservative politicians that don't think the environment is important. They're not interested, and they just don't understand what's at stake. We do. In a few years, when my children ask me what I did to fight climate change, I intend to give them a solid answer. Friends, this Liberal platform is the Liberal plan to continue to move our country forward. And it includes a series of measures that I want to talk to you about today. The section on education.
Education matters to young people across the country, of course. But it's especially top of mind here in Ontario as Doug Ford slashes education funding and makes it near impossible to pay for tuition. But in a rapidly changing global economy, education has never been more important. Because let's face it, people around the world are anxious about their futures. As workplaces reimagine to incorporate automation and AI, workers aren't sure where they fit in. You're nervous, and we hear you. Liberals believe in supporting people throughout their education journey. And during our 4 years in government, we walked the talk, especially when it comes to post-secondary. We increased student grants by 50%, We made it so that no new grad has to start repaying their loan until they're making at least $25,000. And we've changed the rules so people on EI can go back to school without losing their benefits. And of course, we cut interest rates on student loans. That's what we did over the past 4 years, but more needs to be done, especially now. You see, conservative provincial governments are trying to balance the budget on the backs of families and students, all while the cost of tuition keeps going up. When I visited colleges and universities across the country or hosted town halls across Canada, the cost of education and the debt that follows are always top of mind. We've all seen the news and heard the stories. More and more students are dropping out because they no longer have funding. Young people are forced to pick up second or third jobs to pay for textbooks or switch to part-time and extend their program by a few years. Young Canadians heading off to school should be excited about embarking on this new journey, but instead are losing sleep and racking their brains over how to pay for it. That's not okay. So our Liberal team is stepping up once again to help students. Today, I'm happy to announce that a re-elected Liberal government will further increase student grants by 40% under the old Harper... But let me tell you what that means. Under the old Harper Conservative government, the maximum Canada student grant was $2,000 a year. But today's announcement, when combined with previous Liberal increases, will bring the maximum Canada student grant to $4,200 a year. And we're doing even more to relieve the financial pressures facing grads. Under our plan, those who carry student loans will have a 2-year grace period following graduation, no payments and no interest. Young people just starting their careers should be focused on networking and interviews, so we're going to give you a bit of breathing room to do just that. But we're also going to let new parents hit the pause button on repayment when they have a baby, because in those important early years of starting a family, new parents should be focused on their kids, not on their loans. And finally, we're changing the rules again, so that after the 2-year grace period, loan repayment won't start until new grads are making at least $35,000 a year.
In a rapidly changing global economy, education has never been more important, especially post-secondary education. So we have to make it more affordable. As conservative politicians make cuts, you can count on our Liberal team to invest where those investments are needed. Because ultimately, politics is about serving people, serving you. And whatever your circumstances, you deserve a real plan for the future.
In this election, Canadians are faced with an important choice. Will we move backward, or will we stand together and choose forward? Here is our promise as Liberals. We won't give tax breaks to the 1% or big polluters, but we will make life more affordable and fight climate change. I'm for moving forward for our planet, for our students, for families, and for everyone. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Merci mes amis. Thank you. So the way this is going to work now is I'm going to take some questions from media, and then we're going to open it up, and we're going to do a town hall conversation where you can all ask me questions. So I'm looking forward to that. But first of all, we head to the media mic.
Mr. Trudeau, thank you. Good afternoon. I want to start. My name is Omar from CTV News. I want to start with the costing of your platform today. You borrowed when times were bad to generate an economic stimulus. Now you're saying times are better, but they could get bad, so you want to continue borrowing. And I'm just wondering, at what point will you start actually paying back the billions you've borrowed?
We are making a different choice than the Conservatives do. We're choosing to invest in middle-class Canadians, invest in people's communities, because quite frankly, that is what has worked over the past 4 years. Responsible investments have led to the creation of over 1 million new jobs, most of them full-time, and lifting 900,000 people, including 300,000 kids, out of poverty. Conservatives are still making the argument that the way to grow the economy is through cuts and austerity and tax breaks that go to the wealthiest. We disagree. Our plan is focused on investing in Canadians in a fiscally responsible way that means the size of our debt in relation to the size of our economy is low and will keep getting lower every single year. That's the responsible choice that Liberals are making to build a better future for all of you. And I appreciate the support, but let's not applaud the questions and the answers to media. We can get around to that afterwards. So we'll stay focused on the hard questions.
You know, I don't think it gets to the heart of what I'm asking. I'm just wondering specifically in terms of thresholds or targets or goalposts, at what point do you as leader decide to say, you know what, maybe it's time to scale back on the spending and the promises and start paying back? What is your personal threshold to come to that realization?
We have demonstrated that our approach over the past 4 years of deciding to invest in the middle class, in their communities, in people right across the country, in science and research, is delivering the kind of opportunity and growth that Canadians need. And we are doing it in a responsible way. I will let the Conservatives explain why cuts and austerity, if they really think so, is going to help Canadians. Because we know it won't. It didn't during the Harper years, and that's what we inherited in terms of turning around. But I understand people's focus on the need to stay fiscally responsible, which is why not only will our debt continue to decrease as a proportion of our economy every single year under our plan, but we will retain the AAA credit rating that the international credit rating agencies universally have given to only 2 G7 countries, Germany and Canada, because our plan is fiscally responsible and will continue to be so. That is how we've created and generated the growth that we've had over the past few years, and it is a clear contrast, I agree, a clear contrast with the Conservatives' obsession on cuts in order to balance the books when we already have the best balance sheet in the G7 that this government has put and will continue to put in the service of the Canadian families that need it, not the wealthiest 1%.
We made a different choice, one that's different from the Conservatives who are always advocating austerity and cutting services and benefits for the richest. Instead, we decided to invest in Canadians, in the middle class, and in their communities. And it worked for 4 years. We lifted 900,000 people out of poverty, and we watched as Canadians created 1 million new jobs, most of them full-time. And we recognize that with all that assistance, there are still people that need more help. And that's why we're going to continue to invest in our communities. The Conservatives are proposing cuts, are proposing to give benefits and advantages to the rich, but we will continue to invest because it's worked. We also understand that it's important to remain fiscally responsible and responsible about our investments. And in fact, every year, the size of our debt as a proportion of our economy will be declining, because we know that those investments, those responsible investments, are the best way to continue to create economic growth and help everyone.
Good afternoon, Katie Simpson, CBC News. Is there any, from your perspective, is there any sort of timeline, any sort of target date that you have that a Liberal government, that you will commit to, that a Liberal government would balance the budget?
The Conservatives are the ones obsessed with balancing the budget on the backs of services offered to Canadians, on the backs of education, on the backs of our healthcare system. We made in 2015, and we're making this year, for the next 4 years, a very different choice. We are choosing to invest in people and in their communities, and at the same time stay responsible so that our debt to GDP ratio continues to decrease every single year. There are only 2 countries in the G7 with unanimous AAA ratings from the international bond rating agencies: Canada and Germany. Our plan is responsible because it invests in Canadians and invests in our future. The Conservatives are trying to tell you that cuts and austerity are the way to benefit the economy. They are wrong. That is the choice Canadians are facing right now. Do we choose to continue to move forward, or do we go back to the Harper years?
I'm noting that you did not specifically answer my question, so I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. A Liberal government does not have a target date or goal in mind as to when it would balance a budget, if it ever wanted to.
The Liberal government that we've led over the past 4 years, and the one that we are looking to continue, makes the choice to invest in Canadians, but to do so in a responsible way. And the fiscal anchor we've chosen is to make sure that the size of our debt, as a proportion to the size of our economy, continues to decrease every single year. That is the responsible choice for Canadians, because it has allowed us to invest in people, in their communities, and in your future, in students, in our seniors, in families, because we know that is how we create more growth. Now, the Conservatives will tell you that balancing the books through cuts, through careful tax breaks to the wealthiest, is the best way to create growth. We disagree, and we have 4 years of proof points to demonstrate that this is how we grow the economy. And that is the choice facing Canadians right now. Do we continue to support families, to invest in the middle class, to invest in our communities? Or do we choose to double down on the Conservative approach, which you know well in Ontario, is cuts to education, cuts to services, cuts to families, cuts to health, as a way of trying to balance the books at all costs? We're making a different choice, and that is the choice that is at the heart of what Canadians are facing this election up till October 21st.
We are making a choice that's very different from the Conservatives. They will continue to say that balancing the budget at all costs, by cutting services, by cutting investments in families, by cutting investments in our communities, is the right way to move forward. But we all remember what 10 years of Conservative government under Harper did to our economy. We were at a standstill. We couldn't create the necessary growth. And yet, in 4 years, under our approach, which invests in people in their communities, we saw the creation of 1 million new jobs. We lifted 900,000 people out of poverty, and we continued to show that a society that's confident about its future invests in that future. And that's the contrast people will be seeing. Should we double down on our conservative approach here in Ontario and elsewhere, by choosing cuts and austerity, or should we continue to invest in families and our communities? I prefer to move forward I choose to invest in Canadians, and I encourage Canadians to make the responsible choice on October 24th. Mr. Trudeau, in terms of new revenues, the 10% on luxury articles and $1.7 billion with tax loopholes, the parliamentary budget officer says there's a lot of uncertainty around the figures you're putting forward. Why move forward with those figures when there's so much uncertainty as to whether they're accurate? Because we have the experience of 4 years behind us. In 2015, we also opted for investments and savings in terms of revenues, and we widely exceeded our targets in 2015, and we know that we can do even more this time. We have the experience of 4 years of government behind us, and we know that by getting more money from the rich, from the wealthiest, by closing off tax loopholes, we can go and bring in significant amounts of revenue. And we have invested a lot of money in the Canadian Revenue Agency in recent years to increase our ability to close off those loopholes, and we're very confident about our ability to continue to do that. Now, in 2015, a lot of things have changed. In 2015, it was difficult. You said you would balance the budget in 3 or 4 years. Then, at the end, now you're putting in a tax on the web giants when you said you weren't. Now, why are you now coming forward with a tax on web giants? Well, first of all, we showed that responsible investments in our communities over the last 4 years have created economic growth and benefits for individuals and economic stability, the kind of economic and social stability that other countries envy us for. At the same time, we have seen the transformation of the global economy with the arrival of more and more global multinationals such as Disney that are providing streaming services in Canada. And we think it's important to ensure that Canadian companies can benefit from the same advantages as international giants. And that's why we're working with the international community to come up with a responsible approach.
The Orgitas Bloomberg News. You mentioned many times that you retained your fiscal anchor, declining debt to GDP ratio, but just barely, right? 2018, the debt to GDP ratio was 30.9%. In 2020, you see that 30.9%. In 2021, you see that 30.8%. It's very easy to imagine a scenario where that debt to GDP ratio increases or just inches up anyways. What would you do in that situation? How wedded are you to your fiscal anchor?
Well, I think as we are entirely wedded to the fiscal anchor, I think reducing the size of our debt as a proportion of our GDP every year is the responsible thing to do. But I will make a mention of that we took as our starting point for this fiscal frame the PBO's budgetary projections, because that's the responsible and prudent thing to do. Except from the time that the PBO's fiscal frame was put out in June, we've already seen multiple bank and private sector economists say that those numbers were far too pessimistic. We're already on a much better track than we were before. So we have tremendous confidence in Canadians, in the Canadian economy, that as we continue to invest in people and create opportunities and contribute to a frame that is creating better competitiveness, better entrepreneurship, more jobs, we're going to continue to demonstrate the wisdom of investing in people as a way of growing the economy. And the contrast with Conservatives who just want to cut to balance the budget at all costs.
I realize it's a hypothetical, but let's say the economy doesn't grow as quickly as you thought it would, and that debt to GDP ratio starts to inch higher. Would you cut spending or not spend as much as you wanted to in order to meet your fiscal anchor?
But as I just laid out, we've already seen the economy grow significantly better than even those pessimistic projections by the parliamentary budget officer. We are going to continue to invest in people because we know that is what creates growth and opportunity for all Canadians and leads to a better economic outlook for us all at a time of anxiety and uncertainty in the world. Investing in Canadians is the sure way to create greater opportunities. And again, the contrast is crystal clear with Conservatives who are obsessed with cutting to balance the books at all costs, where we are focused on investing responsibly in you for our future.
Abigail Beeman, Global News. There are at least 3 major promises in this platform that are not costed. No specifics on pharmacare, nothing on a low-cost national flood insurance plan, and nothing on a guaranteed income for parents who don't qualify for EI. How can you commit to that lowering the debt to GDP ratio when there's some big promises that don't have price tags?
Well, we recognize that on pharmacare, there's only so much the federal government can do on our own. We have moved forward in 3 big pieces of the expert panel report on how to bring in national pharmacare. That is making sure we're moving forward on a Canada Drug Agency, making sure we're moving forward on high-cost drugs for rare diseases, and moving forward to lower the cost of medications through bulk purchasing power, which is actually on track to saving Canadians $13 billion a year over the next 10 years. But we also know that, yes, it is going to require partnership with the provinces. And we recognize that Doug Ford and Jason Kenney and other provincial premiers are not going to want to be investing in healthcare, investing in your services. So the question for Canadians becomes, who do you want sitting across the table to negotiate the future of our healthcare? Andrew Scheer, who supports Doug Ford and Jason Kenney and is supported by them, or a Liberal government that is going to continue to put your interests first? That is the choice facing Canadians.
Not all of the promises are dependent on the provinces, so I ask again, how can you commit to lowering debt to GDP ratio without price tags?
We worked with the Parliamentary Budget Officer on costing our platform. This is something that we put in place as a government. It was a commitment we made in 2015 to make sure that all political parties had access to the Parliamentary Budget Officer to make sure that Canadians were properly informed about the strengths and weaknesses and the responsibilities and costings of the various platforms. We were proud to be able to make this available not just to parties, but through the parties to Canadians, so people can see what these investments are and how they're going to build a stronger future. We will, of course, design these programs in a responsible way once we form government, if that's the choice Canadians make. But I can assure you, we will continue to stand by that fiscal anchor that ensures that we're investing responsibly in your future through giving you the strength to succeed and your communities.
Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. You're planning to spend $525 million in new money on the Learn to Camp program and $400 million in new money on tackling gun violence. Why are you spending more on Learning to Camp than on tackling gun violence?
We recognize that there's always more to do, and we will keep doing it. When it comes to gun control, Canadians have a very simple choice. Liberals want to strengthen gun control. Conservatives want to weaken gun control. We know that supporting communities that want to restrict or ban handguns is something we need to do. Banning military-style assault weapons right across the country is something that Canadians have long asked for and something we will be delivering. Conservatives are going to weaken gun control, so we are pleased to be working and investing in communities on that. On the environment, we know that Canadians care deeply about how we are protecting nature and how we are raising future generations of Canadians who understand the opportunities and the responsibility to be stewards of the environment. That's why we invested over the past 4 years more money in the Learn to Camp program. And we saw the numbers go from 10,000 people a year through this Parks Canada program to 100,000 people a year. And the interest in this program and the opportunities given to Canadians from coast to coast to coast has exploded, and we are happy to be investing so even more people can discover the great outdoors. We are making choices that both protect the environment and make our communities safer. And again, it's a direct contrast with conservatives who want to weaken gun control and will do nothing to protect our environment.
Are your priorities, though, not out of step with Canadians? Do you think Canadians support spending more money on camping than on fighting gun violence?
This election is about a choice between Liberals who are going to be investing more in protecting the environment, investing more in stronger gun control, versus Conservatives who don't think protecting our environment or fighting climate change is a priority at all because they have no plan for that. They were hiding from the climate marches on Friday. Or investing more in supporting our nature. These are the things that Canadians are going to make a choice about in the coming weeks.
Chris Reynolds, Canadian Press. You mentioned that under Doug Ford's cuts to education, about 10,000 teachers would lose their jobs. But according to Ontario's Financial Accountability Office, that reduction in teaching positions can be achieved without any layoffs at all. That can likely be achieved through attrition. Doug Ford isn't even on the ballot. Are you trying to mislead Canadians by associating Scheer with Ford?
Mr. Scheer is the person who has associated himself with Doug Ford. And we have seen at which point Conservatives campaign on saying they're for the people and then turn around and make real cuts that affect people's lives. And that's exactly the frame that Andrew Scheer and the federal Conservatives are putting forward. You want a proof point of what Andrew Scheer has done, would do? Look at what Doug Ford has done. That is what Canadians need to be aware of and responsible for. Andrew Scheer is asking Canadians to double down on the kind of Conservative leadership that weakens gun control, that does nothing for our environment, and at the same time gives tax breaks to the wealthiest while cutting services for everyone else. I know Canadians are very aware of the choice that they're facing between our Liberal vision to continue moving forward with a Conservative approach that goes back through cuts and austerity.
For a speech that's talking about your own plan, you've spent a lot of time talking about Mr. Scheer as well as Doug Ford. Why?
This election is about a choice. This election is about a choice of the kind of country we want to live in, the kind of future we want to build. And the choice couldn't be clearer. Two very different visions of how to move the country forward. The Conservatives think that balancing the budget at all costs through cuts and austerity and giving advantages and tax breaks to the wealthiest in the hopes that it'll trickle down to create growth for everyone else, well, that's their approach. I think it's the wrong approach. And in 2015, Canadians thought it was the wrong approach as well, because they chose a government that instead wanted to invest in the middle class, invest in their communities, invest in science. Restoring the long-form census is one of the very first things we did. We decided to invest in Canadians' future. And 4 years later, we have the numbers to show for it. 900,000 Canadians lifted out of poverty, including 300,000 kids. Over 1 million new jobs created, most of them full-time, and the lowest unemployment in 40 years. That's what the choice gave us in 2015. That's the choice facing Canadians right now. Do we go back to the failed Harper approach, which is exactly what Andrew Scheer is offering? Or do we continue to move forward with a Liberal plan that invests in Canadians? I'm for moving forward.
Kathleen Harris from CBC News. Without a dollar figure in the platform for pharmacare, should Canadians assume that there will be no tangible progress other than discussions with the provinces in the next 4 years?
We have already made tangible progress in pharmacare. We have set in place measures that will reduce the cost of prescription drugs by $13 billion for Canadians over the next 10 years. We have moved forward on absorbing the cost of high-cost medicines for rare diseases, which was a significant challenge for the provinces. And we're moving forward on the creation of a Canadian drug agency that will create a national formulary. But yes, there is more investment and more work to do with the provinces. But I can tell you, we will not be sending a single penny to Doug Ford or Jason Kenney if they are not prepared to move forward in a real way on a national pharmacare plan. That is why we know there are negotiations to have, and the question for Canadians is, who do they want sitting across from Doug Ford negotiating the future of our healthcare system? Andrew Scheer or this Liberal government?
Talk about his life before entering politics and his credentials. Do you think he misled Canadians on his credentials before?
I will let Andrew Scheer answer those questions. Our focus is on building a stronger future for all Canadians.
Last question, dernière question.
Mr. Trudeau, your India trip was a great success, though it has some controversies too. We don't have very great relations with China, but at the same time, India, which is the largest democracy in the world, we are a democratic country too. That they are fastest growing economy, but we don't see much progress in these relations. We can see lots of Indo-Canadian foreign students here in this hall. You have enough members in your caucus too, but we don't see that reflecting in the policies of India and Canada. If you are re-elected again, any take on that?
We have actually succeeded in increasing commercial relationships with India over the past couple of years. We've seen increased investment, we've seen increased partnership, but absolutely, as you say, there's much more to do. India is a growing economy, taking more and more opportunities up on the world stage. And in Canada's strong relationship with India, both on the commercial level and in terms of people-to-people ties, there is much more to do, and we are continuing to demonstrate that we understand that opening up relations around the world, standing strong for our values, and creating opportunities for Canadians is a real priority. We were able to demonstrate over the past 4 years that we understand that signing trade deals in a way that benefits Canadians, benefits workers, benefits small businesses, is at the heart of how we move forward in a globalized world. That's why we are now the only G7 country with a free trade deal with every other G7 country, and we are going to continue to ensure that Canadian small businesses and workers benefit from our participation in the global economy, and we'll be, of course, continuing to work on closer commercial relations and people-to-people ties with all of our friends around the world, including India. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you very much. For the media questions, now we get to the fun part. I'm going to start here, and we'll go right around the room, and I'll start with you, right there.
My name is Carla Cisneros. I'm a PhD candidate at the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs in Ottawa. Before I ask my question, I wanted to mention that I got inspired to start my PhD after I heard a speech from you and another speech from President Barack Obama. So I'd really like to shake your hand after this town hall, if you would allow me.